So again, back to Microsoft and TikTok, and again, we're not going to make this a politics conversation about this at all. But when we talk about TikTok, right, TikTok has been in the news a ton for its privacy issues, specifically in the sense that TikTok as an app is owned by the Chinese government, and it has a tendency to have very, very overarching permissions, to the sense that it's become a pretty huge concern for other countries as well. And we see this, with countries like India, where it has actually gone out and started to ban TikTok as an app inside the country. And so, and then when we talk about that, and we talk about it being on the heels of the Twitter hack here recently, with where Twitter has been a victim of a cyber attack, whereby some folks took over some very, very high profile social media accounts. We talk about some of the implications that could have from a cyber perspective, and I really just kind of want to throw it out there, Tori, to you, and see what you think. Like, with 100 million users on a platform like TikTok, the fact that we've already got Facebook and Snap out there for Snapchat, and that Microsoft already owns parts of LinkedIn, which is another huge social media. Do you think the U.S. needs another large conglomerate like Microsoft owning one of the largest and potentially cyber influential social media sites that are out there?
Well, I think and I have kids that use TikTok. I don't, but I think just from we're trying to protect you from you perspective, I would much rather have Microsoft own it than the Chinese government owning it, or Chinese company owning it. So, I guess from that perspective, I don't really have an issue. I feel like, especially in some of these platforms, specifically that are targeted to a younger user base who is not that educated, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about education tonight, is it can't help for kids and younger people who aren't as familiar with cyber, to have some guardrails, and I think Microsoft would help us do that. And we could argue, well, Facebook's security strategy hasn't been great or whatever, but I think I'd rather have Microsoft doing it, I guess, would be my opinion on that.
But I mean, you bring up a really good point about education, right? Because and I've mentioned this several streams ago, when we talk about security awareness, we don't we don't license folks to use the internet. And I know that that's a really that's
I love that you said that on one of yours. I love that. I was picturing my daughter like coming up to her computer and she's like, I got to pass this test before I get on the internet. And I thought, well, that's never going to happen because they wouldn't do it.
No, but you mentioned, you brought up a really good point about help Microsoft being an advocate for helping kids be more safe on the internet, by it being owned by Microsoft. But how can we've, to your point, we've seen Facebook fail at that over and over again. We've seen Snapchat fail at that over and over again. What makes you think that Microsoft is any better at it?
Well, I mean, I think, like with anything, it's a layered approach, right? So I think there's education, that all of those companies could be better at. And again, I'm going to assume that if it's Microsoft or Facebook, that they're putting their best foot forward to do education. I think they can do a better job, but I think there's outward education, and then I think there's internal education, right? So those platforms need to be secure internally. That has nothing to do with their users. Their users should feel comfortable that their platform is being secured by the company. But then they're like the license thing, there does need to be more education. And I think, I don't know, I'm bullish in that there will become more regulations around it, just not allowing kids to kind of blow their big toe off, and not even kids, I say kids, but I mean any user, right? Because it's a tricky area to navigate, I think, for sure.
Do you, when we talk about social media and we talk about privacy, right? I think Cambridge Analytica, and again, not to turn this political, but more on the sense of, like, we saw with Cambridge Analytica just how free isn't really free for us, and your data has a value to companies like Facebook and Snapchat and
Yeah.
Microsoft and things like that. You know, do we think that Microsoft needs more information on us? Like, I mean, if we ask that question, if we said, if Microsoft bought TikTok and its 100 million users and even blew it up and grew it to try to be a large competitor to Facebook and Snapchat, how much more intrinsic damage could that do to user privacy?
Well, it's a free country, right? So you don't have to be on it, right? I mean, you don't have to be on it if you don't want your data, right? There's a trade-off there. So I want to be on it because I want to communicate or want to show videos or make the videos or whatever or do it, because certainly there's platforms
I want to see Tori up there doing Renegade on TikTok.
platforms for good, but I also think that's the trade-off, right? And that's what's happening. Again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I guess for me, I'd rather Microsoft be doing it than the Chinese, I suppose, right? But maybe that's a false sense of security. But I will go back to the internal obligation of those companies, which is it is their obligation to keep your data private, right? And they have to have measures in place to do that. And we see, I mean, that's the whole part of the reason for your show is we see every day that companies are breached and that doesn't happen, right? But we all have to strive towards making that happen. And obviously that's the business I'm in, so I'm pretty intimate with the fact that I think some people do it good and some people don't do it so good. So, um, but that is their obligation.
Now, since you bring up data privacy and you bring up companies protecting privacy, and this is a little bit of a rabbit hole when we talk about this, but since we're going down this, let's pull on this thread a little bit longer. Right? Is do you think GDPR and do you think CCPA are doing good for data privacy concerns, especially in social media sites like Facebook and Snapchat and potentially Microsoft owning TikTok in the future?
I mean, I think what I would say is from what I've seen on the enterprise side, um, data security does not mean secure, or data protection does not mean security. I think I think people have really good intentions and they try, but data protection is a tricky talk about a rabbit hole. It's a real trick. And I do, the reason I make the comment is that I don't think data protection equals security. Is I feel like sometimes there is a false sense of, well, I'm secure because I followed these regulations or I did what I was told to do. No,
No.
it doesn't work like that.
So when
It doesn't.
no,
Know that.
I know that. I know that, but I think I think the false sense of security, I would agree with that sentiment, right? Because, CCPA, so for those listening, right, California just released their California Consumer Privacy Act. One of the mods can please link CCPA in there. GDPR 2 years ago released their data privacy regulation for the EU, and I think I've mentioned this on a couple of previous streams as well. I think we're going to see, I think Maine and New York, if I recall correctly, I think are two of the states that are going to quickly follow suit for those data privacy. And I remember when CCPA happened, the day CCPA went live, Facebook got hit with just this massive lawsuit over California consumer privacy issues that were out there. And so like it's curious when Microsoft wants to step into that game as well, because are they really saying that they're prepared, they're more prepared than Facebook and Snapchat that have been doing this longer and better to deal with those data privacy issues?
Well, I mean, I love the fact that the new laws for data privacy, right? So again, because I like rules, and I think if it's easier to abide by something that is a mandate, right, versus you could do it if you want to. So I think, and that I think that helps give us a framework to guide, or helps companies have a framework to guide themselves. Um, I can't, company to company. I mean, I can't really speak to a Facebook or I mean, I think I think they're all in a tricky situation. Microsoft's not looking to buy TikTok so they can lose money on it, right? So, I mean, they're into it for a reason, and they should be, and I applaud them, and they're an amazing company. So, they'll have to figure that out. But at the same time, I'm sure that they are prepared to figure that out in the best way that they can.
So just I want to pull on one more thread, just since you brought it down in terms of the data privacy stuff. When we look at some of the follow-on lawsuits on data privacy around things like British Airways and Marriott over in the EU, where they've gone out of their way to have those lawsuits for GDPR filed in the UK, so that they can intentionally get the least restrictive of that 15% revenue fine that they're supposed to get. don't you think that it nullifies the effect of having those data privacy regulations for companies to be constantly out there looking for your loopholes, or is that just business as usual for legal teams?
No, I think it's totally bogus, right? I mean, it is, but it's going to happen, so you have to be prepared for it, right? I mean, I think, but again, because you know what's going to happen, you have to do everything that you can on the back end to make sure that you're protected, right? And that's not just technology, that's people, that's processes, that's your legal team. I mean, that's there's a lot of things that go into that because it's going to happen. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, whether I think it's right or not, it doesn't matter.
So final word on Microsoft buying TikTok. You a thumbs up or a thumbs down on Microsoft buying TikTok?
I have a thumbs up.
You're a thumbs up on Microsoft buying
Yeah.
TikTok. There you go, folks. Looks like somebody in chat made a comment. Security guru guy, thank you very much for that. Tori, I'll let you chime in first on this one if you want to. Companies generally only pay attention to a security guideline in quotes if ignoring it would cost them money via lawsuits, etc. Agree? Disagree?
Say that again. Yeah.
Companies generally only pay attention to a security guideline if ignoring it would cost them money via lawsuits, etc.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that? Why not?
No. No, because I think companies. I'm going to talk general security,
Sure.
right? More than just data protection. I really do think that companies, from what my experience, right, and I have dealt with a lot of large enterprise company. I think it's way more than lawsuits. I think it really is genuinely trying to protect the company's users, the company's IP, the company's brand. I mean, I think it's far and beyond the company's money, right? So, like, look at all the ransomware attacks, right? I mean, and some of those payments are nothing to those companies, but you know, it's obviously bad. So yeah, no, I would say companies are trying to secure their environments because it's the right thing to do.
So I'm going to take security guru guys stance on this one because I am in the cynical camp that I think that the reason that we don't have people taking security guidelines seriously is because the sting isn't hard enough for them. I've said this before we ever started streaming. You and I have talked about this before. I've talked about this at anywhere I can say it, right, is we don't make it painful enough for companies to fail their data protection responsibility for users. The banks have been doing this for years, right, where because whenever you swipe that credit card and it shows up as a fraudulent transaction and the bank takes care of you and it's like, hey, don't worry about it, we'll refund you your money, we'll send you a new credit card, yada 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 yada. I think that coddling of the user base has prevented the users from feeling a sting, and therefore it's prevented the companies from feeling a sting whenever they've had a data breach. And I'll give you a real world example with Target, right? And I'm not knocking Target at all, right? Because they're a fantastic business, but they only suffered 1/4's loss of data for losing all of that credit card information, and now they're at record profit levels. And so I absolutely think that companies will ignore most security guidelines until the sting of that is high enough, or at least until the user sting of that is high enough.
Well, but they're also the poster child for a breach. I mean, how many years ago was that? And we're still talking about it. How many companies have been breached since then? But but you're right. I mean, financially, it didn't really hurt them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. The sting is a tricky one.
What would you think should, let's take a Microsoft TikTok deal, right? Let's say Microsoft buys TikTok, and literally the day after the deal closes, some massive data security breach gets exposed about the amount of data that's leaked out there by TikTok. What would make the sting hurt good for a company like TikTok to say, or for a company like Microsoft to say, oh shoot, we've got to take this seriously?
I have no idea. You have no idea. I mean, neither one of us have any idea. You don't, right?
You don't.
Because to your point, the ramifications, generally the sting is really bad for a little bit, and then it just kind of goes away. I will say though that anybody who's suffered any sort of breach doesn't, there is sting. It's not like they just walk away and go, oh, well, that was too bad that that happened. I would say in almost every case, there's at least a lesson learned or change of process or, something like that. So that's good. I mean, that brings awareness. Um, but I don't know. I have to have a no comment on
Yeah.
should the penalties be higher to the guy whose card gets hacked, right? Like I have to have a no comment on that
Yeah.
one because I think that's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.